Connecting with different mental health advocates around the world will help in our mission to reduce the stigma associated with mental health. You never know whose journey will resonate with you most. Through networking, I connected with today's guest from a mutual friend, Shake. She is an artist based in South Carolina who wants to share her mental health journey with you. After connecting with Jenn and learning her entrepreneurial journey on that entrepreneur show, I also learned her interest in sharing her story. Welcome back to A Mental Health Break. I'm your host, Vincent A. Lanci. I'm the author of 2 books for your mental health, Mr. Lanci Talks Mental Health and Mental Health Week. Head to vincentalanci.com after the episode. For everyone new to the show, welcome. I interview a different mental health professional or advocate from around the country and across the world to share their story relating to mental health. I would like to share that this episode is brought to you by Tampa Counseling and Wellness, dedicated to helping individuals looking to positively transform their lives through compassionate counseling and wellness coaching. If you struggle with depression, anxiety, or other mental health issues, call today for a free consultation. Therapy that inspires change. Find their information in the show description. One thing I learned during my recovery process with my traumatic brain injury is that everyone's brain is unique and different. Every person who I've had the pleasure of interviewing brings firsthand stories that help you battle through the toughest of times. Jenn Griffith is here to share her story, share how she stays mentally healthy, how art is excellent for her mental health, and so much more. So Jenn, thank you for coming on another show.
Thanks so much for having me. Glad to be with you.
Yeah, happy to have you. Would you mind introducing yourself a little more to our audience who may have not caught your show on the other platform?
Absolutely. My name is Jenn Griffith, as Vincent said. I am a full-time artist, a studio artist. I paint mostly murals and canvases and paint on surfboards. And now that we're out of COVID world, I'm really trying to get back into living a life with the community and going out seeing people. And although Zoom is a great way to be part of a community too. So that's how we're friends.
Yeah, we've never met in person. We've met on Zoom. She is coming to Tampa shortly. So we are discussing a possible event. So stay tuned later in time, everyone listening on. We know she's an artist, full-time out there in South Carolina. But for today's show, we're going to look more on the mental health side of things. Obviously, the more common and spoke about types of mental health disparities are mood disorders, anxiety disorders, or schizophrenia disorders. What did you experience, Jenn?
Anxiety has definitely been my number one demon. For the past 10 or 12 years, I guess, it's really been a big front runner in my life. Anxiety set on for me very heavily when I was in college, and I've been working through that for the past 11 years or so.
I can resonate. Anxiety is what riddled me as well, especially after my accident. It's just something that is a part of my life, and I just through time learn ways to best manage it and know what situations are going to give me more anxiety than others. But since you're on this path, what are some things that work for you short-term and long-term that help you manage the anxiety?
It's been a long road to managing it. And it's kind of crazy because when having anxiety wasn't something that was even necessarily diagnosed to me. For me, it manifested in these crying spells, and I would get so worked up and so anxious that I didn't know how to really manage my emotions or my fears of things. And now it honestly just took a lot of years of working through it to be able to figure out how to better manage it for myself. Like you mentioned a second ago, knowing what will trigger it or what types of things or social events to honestly have to remove myself from in order to be able to prevent having sort of a breakdown or an episode. And that's kind of a long term, but short term for me, I really day to day, just focus on one task at a time and not getting too overwhelmed by everything in a day, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Not putting too much on your plate is a big part of it. Doing what you can, not worrying about what you can't. But I do want to touch on the creative side of things. You are an artist. Parts of both of my mental health books, creativity plays a role in each book. One of the experts is Chris Bridge. She's a painter, she's an author, she's a visionary like you. How does art affect your mental health?
It affects it in good and bad ways. Since I'm a business owner, it can sometimes create anxiety for me because there is a lot of unknown. But at the same time, it is amazing that I get to do this as a career. And art it can be so peaceful, ASMR and the hashtag oddly satisfying. It really can be so peaceful to mix paint and those are the really small aspects of it, but on a larger scale it's very rewarding and it helps my ability to achieve tasks and to kind of give myself a personal gold star when I get a painting done and I see it go from a blank canvas to a completed piece of work. Could ramble on about some other things related to that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that. I would like to backtrack though and talk about when you decided to start sharing your story relating to mental health. Is this the first time you're doing so? What was that moment like when you wanted to share your story?
I think this is the first time I'm really doing so publicly and talking about it in this kind of succinct way. It's been something, of course, I've talked with friends and family or coworkers in the past while I'm going through things or if they're having a similar issue. But I think honestly, and this isn't even, a remarkable thing at all, it was almost being on the other side of it. Once I realized I had anxiety for so long, it was almost like this, I can see clearly now the rain is gone. I
Absolutely.
feel like I'm able to speak to it in a way that previously I wasn't really able to put words to.
Well, I thank you for coming on and sharing your story because I have a strong passion for having people share their stories. That's why I started my next series, Vince Story Share, because you're not alone in what you're going through. If someone has the courage to share their story, chances are something they're sharing is something you're going through. It doesn't matter if it's where she's living, if it's in South Carolina, if it's the anxiety, something in her story may resonate with you best. But what are some other things you're going to do for yourself in the future for your mental health or raise awareness for mental health? What are some things you're going to be working on?
I really think having open dialogue like this is so important, both to myself and other people. Having these prompts and ways to talk about my own mental health is, even in the short term, something that makes me feel more at peace with it. And just continuing to have conversations, both, like I said, with strangers, friends, coworkers, and also just being open to other people who might need to talk about it. It can be just I like that mental health is becoming something that is so much more accessible and less stigmatized. We've all got, your brain, everyone's got a brain. Everyone has mental health, we got to talk about it.
And that's the truth. Now you'd also agree that it's becoming more normalized, the conversation.
Absolutely. At least it seems so to me. As I said, when I was first having so many issues with anxiety, it didn't really even seem like anyone knew what that was. My peers in college didn't really seem to know what it was. And now I would say even 11 years later, it's a much more common term.
Yeah, and day by day conversations like ours, they are breaking down those walls of stigma. And with that, I think it is a great time to get to this week's Spotlight story. If this is your first time tuning in, each week I share the mental health story of someone else because I want to let you, the listeners, know you are not alone. And as we have an artist on the show today, I'm going to share the story of another artist in Shania Diana. And I found this awesome article written during the pandemic in 2020. And I may not have pronounced her name right, but forgive me. Since 2011, West Philly youth arts teacher and local artist Diana has been an advocate for mental health through her visual art. With a goal to humanize and empower, her embryo exhibition series visually represents what it's like to live with a range of mental health issues, as her herself has lived with depression, borderline personality disorder, and general anxiety. And when this came out, the collection was in its 9th year, and it continues its mission in sparking honest dialogue about mental health, reducing the stigma that surrounds it, and encouraging individuals to bravely speak their truth. I'm going to share 2 quotes from her. When asked what was Embryo's initial creation process, part of her quote included, "It was simply my first opportunity to publicly share my work, which consists of visual representations of both my chronic insecurities and my journey toward radical self-acceptance. I've lived with mental health issues, depression, suicidal thoughts since I was 9, and art has been my way to confront those feelings and thinking patterns in a vulnerable, transparent way." And I want to end it with this quote. "Why do you think Philly in particular needs an event like this? As a millennial of color, finding her way through her mental health journey, I'm constantly navigating how to make mental health palatable for myself and audience. I know that mental health is still a conversation not being had in certain communities, as there's still a stigma regarding behavioral health and emotional wellness in circles. People are suffering, often in silence. I see it firsthand as a youth arts teacher in West Philly, and I'm constantly reminded by my students that our space is safe, their voices are heard, and their struggles are recognized." Jen, what do you take away from this story related to mental health?
I think it's great. I actually checked out her work too on Instagram. She's got some cool stuff. I'm glad to see that there are people like her that are making a public statement about about mental health, and I'm sure she gets a much different view of it by working with students. But my takeaway is really stuck out to me by her saying that there are so many people that feel alone in this, and I think that's why you are so important, and why conversations like this are so important, because no one should have to struggle alone. There's no reason anyone today with phones and Zoom and everything should have to be silenced in this. There should always be someone you should be able to talk to.
And I think we're on our way there now. There's even a lot of virtual things going on. I know a popular company is Teladoc. Because of COVID that just passed, there's going to be a lot of underlying mental health issues. And don't be naive to think that yours wasn't affected at all. You could be great at coping with it. You could have great coping mechanisms. For me, exercise is my big thing in the morning. But please use conversations like Jen's today to empower you. And with that, I have to thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate one of your first conversations being on this show. I loved your honesty about the long-term situation with your mental health. You came on here, you talked about your anxiety and how you remove yourself from certain situations. I think that's key, because we know our triggers, we know what can get us on edge. Do a good job at avoiding them. Use her as an example. And I'd like to now ask you, Jen, for your last word.
My last word is probably how important self-talk is. That's maybe another piece of advice rather than a last word, but I found it with myself that how powerful your brain is. You can convince yourself of one thing or another, whether it's an insecurity or an anxiety or anything. If you lead your own self with confidence every day, it can really be helpful.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's something where mindset is everything, and you have to feed the right thoughts into your head. Be kind to yourself so you do have that confidence. How can people find you, Jen?
I'm really trying to get on TikTok. I'm not great at it, but across social media, my name is Jenn Griffith, Jenn Griffith. And I have a website, jengriffithart.com.
She's got a lot of incredible stuff. She actually just partnered up with Yeti. Who else have you been with? You've been with a ton.
Thanks. Yeah, Yeti was a really cool one this year. I've also worked with Lululemon, and I have a couple things in the works right now on some larger murals, and I'm not yet able to disclose that, but hopefully when we sign the contract, I can tell you more.
Absolutely. Well, keep me posted. I'm happy to share your work. And everyone listening on, be sure to reach out to Jenn to say hello. And while you're on social media, be sure to check us out too. We are at a mental health break across the board, except for Twitter. We're at Podcasts by Lanci, so you get updates from all 4 shows. Of course, my handles are at Vincent A. Lanci on all social media and YouTube. And my website is vincentalanci.com. Of course, let me know if you check out my books. We have Mental Health Week and Mr. Lanci Talks Mental Health. I would love to hear what you think. And with that, I want to thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week on a mental health break. Thank you, Jenn.
Thank you.